Welcome to the Real Fast Spanish Tips podcast. If you're interested in achieving a conversational level in Spanish and want to learn more, check out realfastspanish.com. Welcome to episode 2 of the Real Fast Spanish Tips podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Barr. In this episode, or this second tip, I'm going to introduce the second D of language learning. Now, this tip is the most important tip that any language learner can know. If you can get anything from this podcast, anything that I'm going to share with you, it's this one tip. And that is desire. It's how much you want it. How much do you actually want to learn Spanish? What's your motivation? If there is anything that separates the students that get really good and those that don't and give up, it's motivation. How do I know that this tip is so important? Because I know that when my levels of motivation and desire were high, my Spanish was accelerating. And when they were low, it was really slowing down. It's so critical. I mean, why is it so useful? Well, learning a language is something that requires delayed gratification. It's like losing weight, quitting smoking, getting fit, going to the gym, lifting weights. It's something that requires effort. And there are going to be road bumps along the way. That's the point. Some days you won't feel like it. Some days there are going to be things that are going to get in the way. There'll be too many things to do. You'll have things vying for your attention. And sometimes it'll be lazy, or you'll have to do something that'll make you feel uncomfortable. Maybe you'll have to have your first session of practicing, or you'll be making mistakes, or there will be vocab that's difficult to memorize. There'll be so many things. But the question comes back to how much that you want it. And if you want it so badly, then all of these things that are going to get in the way, they won't be a hassle. You'll be able to get over them. So I want to use a metaphor, and I really wish I'd introduced this into the first podcast, but I'm going to introduce it now. So that is that if you think of language learning as a journey, take a boat out in the ocean. In episode 1, we talked about the importance of definition. Well, for me, the definition is your end point. It's where you're trying to get to. So if you're out in the ocean, you're on a boat, and you're trying to find a destination of where you want to get to, or when you can get a better definition of where it is that you're going, you're going to be able to plot a course. Now, this second D of language learning, desire, is the fuel. It's what's going to get you to that destination. So although I think this is the most important tip, definition is really important because it helps you plot a course. The speed at which you go through that course is all dependent on your desire. And I'll say it's not easy to get, but the ones who do are just going to get to their definition so much quicker. You know, if we take this metaphor of the boat to the extreme, we could say that, you know, some days there are going to be storms, there are going to be rough ocean bumps. Maybe you might take on some water. maybe the engine breaks down. The higher your desire, the better your fuel will be. Well, if your engine breaks down, maybe the fuel won't work as well. But I think you get the point. Now, this may be obvious. You're thinking, sure, Andrew, I get it. Motivation is critical to learning Spanish, blah, 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 blah. But here's what's not obvious, and that is that it can be hacked. You can ramp up your levels of motivation with a few simple, actionable techniques. So before I get into those, I'm just going to share the quote that I've got for this episode. Don't let the fear of the time it will take to accomplish something stand in the way of doing it. The time will pass anyway. We might as well put that passing time to the best possible use. Now, this is by Earl Nightingale, who was a motivational expert. I'm going to give an example of why I think this quote is relevant. Firstly, I have a lot of friends of mine, I probably couldn't count them on one hand, that have come up to me and said, oh, look, this is really fantastic. You know, you're learning Spanish. You've been doing it for so long. I'd really like to learn a second language. And then I say, well, I'll help you if you want to learn Spanish. And they say, oh, yeah, that'd be great. And then time passes and 6 months pass, a year passes, and they haven't started. Why? It's probably because their desire isn't really high enough. They like the idea of learning a language, but they haven't got to the point where they've said, yes, I'm ready to commit. Now, another person who's close to me in my life is my dad. Now, I'm sorry, Dad, if you ever listen to this podcast, well, I hope you won't, but you're probably going to at some point. I love you to death, but I'm going to use you as an example of what I'm talking about. So my dad said to me a little over 6 months ago, I know it was before Christmas, when he first said, Andrew, I'm really interested in learning a second language. I said, well, if you want to learn Spanish, I'm happy to help. And he says, oh, look, no, I'm really interested in learning Italian. I said, all right, well, that's fine. You know, you've broken my heart a little bit, but that's okay. If Italian's what you want to learn, then so be it. Now, that was definitely, I'm pretty sure that was before Christmas when he first started mentioning it, and we're now in May, so it's been at least 6 months, and I know for a fact that he hasn't made any action towards completing that goal, despite repeating it to me multiple times. Now, there could be lots of reasons for this, but for me, it's abundantly obvious that his desire hasn't got to the point where he can overcome the inertia of actually starting, of buying a book, of starting with a course, even just visiting a few websites that are going to get you going quickly, or just give you a starting point. So hopefully this is sort of explained to you the importance of getting to a point where your desires at a point that you can start overcoming hurdles, you can start overcoming road bumps. Think back to the movie Fight Club. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, that's okay. There's a scene where I'll say you should probably go out and see the movie because I think it's fantastic, but there's a scene in the movie where one of the main characters, Tyler Durden, walks into a convenience store, and he drags the convenience store owner out behind the store and puts a gun to his head. And he says to him, he firstly finds out his name, and then he says, Raymond, what did you want to be when you grew up? He's terrified and sort of stumbles and mutters and says, I don't know. And he says, come on. He said, what did you study? And he said, biology. He said, why? Because I wanted to be a veterinarian. Why did you stop? And he said, too much school. And he said, well, that's just an excuse. He says, I'm going to take your ID. I know where you live. If you're not on your way to becoming a veterinarian in 6 weeks, you will be dead. All right. And then he sends the convenience store clerk off into the darkness of the night. Now, would this work for you? If someone pulled a gun to your head and said, if you're not on your way to learning Spanish in the next 6 weeks, how do you think that would go? It'd be a pretty strong motivator to get you to do the work you have to do to get your Spanish going. Now, obviously, this is a little extreme, but the point is clear. The convenience store clerk has a really, really, really big why for why you should become a veterinarian. And I'm saying the bigger your why, the bigger your chance of learning Spanish. All right, so let's have a look at, I'll give you 5 techniques today that I think are going to really help you ramp up your level of motivation. So these are my 5 tips for hacking motivation. Tip number 1 for hacking Spanish is up the negative drivers. It's, what do you stand to lose if you don't ever learn how to speak Spanish? Think about yourself in 5 or 10 years' time. If you don't take the steps to learn Spanish, what are you going to miss out on? What are all of the fun things that you can do? What are some of the things that you'll be capable of doing if you can actually speak Spanish that you will miss out on? Now, I can tell you from personal experience, I've had some amazing adventures traveling through Spain. And even in Morocco, I remember having some really cool adventures with some people just because of my Spanish-speaking skills. So I'd say the same to you. What are you going to miss out on? That's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is the opposite. If you want to look at this as 2 either sides of a spectrum, what do you stand to gain if you learn Spanish? This is about upping your positive drivers. What are all the cool things that you're going to get if you can actually speak Spanish? Tip 3, choose a better why. So the question I ask a lot of my Spanish students is, why are you learning Spanish? Now, if that reason is enough to motivate you, then fine. But if it's really, oh, look, I'm learning it because it's something to do, I'm learning it because I just feel like it, well, that's not going to be enough to push you through the times when you're not feeling like practicing. So instead, can you choose a better why? Why are you learning? Is it because it's something that you've failed time and time again in the past, learning a language, and you really want to get it right this time? Is it because you want to impress a loved one? Is it because you want to have better experiences when you travel? The better your why and the more important it is to you, the better your chances of being successful. So tip number 4 is accountability. How can you be accountable to your goal of learning Spanish? What can you do to, well, accountability is fantastic for, again, giving you a stronger level of desire. So I've talked about stick.com before on the blog, and I'm going to give I'll give a link in the show notes to Stick. So stick.com is a really great resource for helping people stick to goals. The way it works is you put in your goal or desire, and then what happens is, say you put a deadline, and the deadline might be, say, I want to practice Spanish every day for the next 30 days. So that's your goal. It's a really, really well-defined goal. 30 minutes a day for 30 days is a great goal. And then you say, if I don't achieve this goal, then I'm going to donate. You can put in whatever money you want, but let's just say it's an amount of money that you would feel really uncomfortable losing to a charity that you would feel really uncomfortable giving it to. This is the way it works. Now, you could either give money to a charity that you like, but the NRA, for example, is a really popular one. It's the point is that you would really hate to see your money go to a charity or a cause that you feel strongly against, and so this alone is a really big driver to get you to do what you have to do. Next, get an accountability partner. Find someone else who's trying to go for a big goal. Maybe somebody who was also trying to learn Spanish, but it doesn't have to be Spanish. It could be another language, or someone that's trying to lose weight. And just be accountable to each other. Did you work on your goal today? You can ask them every day, and they can do the vice versa with you. When they're feeling down and they can't find the motivation to do what they need to do, you help them, and then vice versa. The other thing you can do is make an announcement on social media. Just get it out in the public arena that you're learning Spanish. And if you can make this announcement in such a way that it would be severely embarrassing if you failed. Like, hey everybody, I'm going to learn Spanish, and there is absolutely no way I'm going to fail. I'm going to do this. I'm fully committed. I'm putting everything into it. Then of course it's going to be embarrassing when you see that person again and they say, how's the Spanish going? And you go, oh, I've stopped learning. So this is a really good way of, again, ramping up that desire and being accountable to someone more than yourself. The last tip for hacking motivation is to get some skin in the game. So what do I mean by this? I mean, start spending some time and valuable resources on learning Spanish. Either commit some of your time or even some of your money. You could spend some money buying a course, or you could spend a month working on the fundamentals. Once you've built up a bit of momentum, and you've already put some skin in the game, then if you think back to the amount of effort you've put up to a certain point, it will feel like a waste of time and something that you won't want to waste once you've already got that momentum going. So this is another way to think, oh, I've already spent a month, or I've spent this much money, or I've done this, and now I'm going to give up. Oh, I can't. It'd be too much of a loss. And then you can use this to propel yourself forward. So what motivates you? Are you more motivated by loss, or are you more motivated by what you stand to gain? whatever it is that motivates you, find a way of ramping it up, increasing your desire. This is actually a skill that can be learnt. The higher your desire, the easier you'll be able to overcome the roadblocks. And I have full confidence you'll be able to achieve your Spanish goals. All right, that's it for today's episode. If you have any questions, the show notes for this episode is going to be at www.realfastspanish.com/desire. I hope to see you over on the blog. And until next time, thanks for listening.